So I'm eager to just dive in, I think. Is that the way you want to do it?
Yep.
You're in charge, so.
I want to open the floor for those who have questions and just have a casual conversation.
How much time do we have, just so I can know how
12,
short or long answers?
12:30 till 12:30.
I think on the books it's 12:30.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Yep.
about 30 minutes.
So I'll try to, if you want really short answers, give me true or false.
What time does he have to leave?
I'm married.
Probably no later than 1 at the latest, preferably 12:45, 12:50.
So leave us see the time for signing some books and people like that. If he wants that, I'm more than happy to do it.
So I'll also come clean for not quite getting super far into it.
I've thought about this. If there's 5 of you who haven't read the book at all,
Well, I
why don't we make it 3?
I was out of the country for 2 weeks, but I've been.
We'll see the numbers going on Amazon.
I was out of the country for 2 weeks, but I've been trying my best to catch up. But I really enjoyed the opening chapters about, because I was also an international studies major at the University of Washington Jackson School, so
Great.
I'm already geeking out about it.
Good.
But
Thank you.
the explanation of like whether to decide if it's appropriate to get involved somewhere abroad, and I also focused a lot of studies in East Asia, so using Japan as kind of that yardstick of like, well, we did it here, but doesn't necessarily translate to going in and doing what is assumed needs to be done, but then having that same result.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people tend to think is, well, we've done it once, and we've already found ourselves in several messes.
Yeah, quagmires.
Yeah, quagmires. So.
You know, it's interesting. I mean, one of the things that's happened with this book is that, in particular, when I've been on a couple of interview shows, that there have been, or call-in shows, there are people who have not necessarily read the book think that my argument that we can do a much better job, we can be more coherent, we can be more thoughtful, we can be more successful, is actually an argument for more intervention, which it isn't. And what I think the public has, there are a couple of sort of dominant attitudes out there. One of them is these places are a god-awful mess, please keep us out of it. And the United States has not been successful recently, so why should we do it? And we're not that good at it ourselves at home. So there are a lot of arguments that people are putting forward for not doing it. But the argument one of the core arguments of the book is that actually almost everybody who's ever done this work now has a criteria, and I try to go through some of the criteria that's mentioned for where we should go and where we shouldn't go. But it starts with a kind of a native modesty that is it a place we care about enough to make really make a genuine sacrifice and do a good job? Is there an opening in the place? Is it the timing right? Could the United States make a difference? So all of those are kind of, or should somebody else do it? Could somebody else do it better? And many times those conversations aren't all that thoughtful because we say, oh yeah, that's a French colony, let's let the French do it. It's like, no, they already screwed it up for 100 years. And so that's not the obvious. It may seem like the obvious choice, but that doesn't make that much sense. So anyway, these are all kind of measures of, and of course there's the sense that, well, we did have the big successes in Japan and Germany, to some extent in Korea, and more recently, we've stopped the fighting in Bosnia, but it's fragile. Colombia, we were, I think, important in that peace, that unfolding peace, although, again, we could have taken more risks and probably helped the peace process more. But, so anyway, I mean, I hope that kind of speaks to, but feel free, this is a conversation, so
Yeah.
if it opens up, if I went astray.
Oh, no. Yeah, I agree with that too. I think you have that nice list of considerations, which I thought were, I thought it was really interesting. Important things to really consider too.
And one of the things that that I started to get at was, you have in our political process sort of, the non-interventionists would probably be far left, far right. But I feel like we've had a very passive, kind of almost a silenced majority between those two arguments. And I really feel the United States can make a difference. It can be a constructive player, although we've not done it very well, so. And so I always liken it to being a local team. If they lose everything for 5 or 6 years, and public enthusiasm drops. The 17-year war in Afghanistan there are not a lot of people who can articulate any element of it, why it's working, and that again doesn't lead to a very good political process. But a big part of that is that our public is not really engaged. I think the public actually cares about this stuff, but the foreign policy elites kind of keep them a little bit out of it. Presidents don't really like to have the Congress messing around. The Congress prefer not to have the responsibility. So we have 20 wars that nobody's ever voted on. And and very generic language that gets us into these things. And I know that the American public is capable of really arguing well, because it only takes a late bus or a pothole to generate civic action, right? So we have to. So it comes down to those of us who are working in this space and who care about global peace. I think global peace really pays for the United States. It pays big time. And there are 2 million people out there who would probably be good customers and a lot of other things. Not to mention that it's fun to be able to travel without thinking you're targeted, and the rest of it. So I just think it's incumbent upon us to make these issues accessible and to not make everything seem so darn exotic that you can't figure out how to do anything about it. I worked on a transportation issue. I worked for the Maine Turnpike Authority for a while when I worked in Maine, not directly, but they were one of my better customers. And somebody ran a referendum to keep them from widening the turnpike from 2 to 3 lanes. And I remember having a conversation with my neighbor one day, and she was leaning towards voting against the widening, which ended up being the winning side, because it was a combination of the left and the right sort of eating away at it, and then throwing in an unpopular governor in the middle who was for it. So that pretty much determined it. But she was telling me why she was going to vote against it, and I remember saying to her, "Man, I'm not sure you understand this issue." And it was like, whoo! That was the end of that conversation. I firmed up her vote so well. So, I mean, again, these are the kinds of things we do in the space, and we've got to just got to do better.
In terms of accessibility, I really appreciated the clear language you used. I thought it was very accessible, and I would think in terms of that, moving that forward for more of the general population. It's for I don't have background in international studies, but I found it very readable and very engaging.
Thank you.
You should know.
Well, I mean, it's when I was working on it as an author, I wanted it to be. I mean, you couldn't have said anything nicer, because I really wanted it to be accessible, expand the market, and I wanted it to be readable, and I didn't have a clue. I mean, just sort of the longest, since it's a book club, you might be a little more interested in the writing than some people, but the longest walk of my day, if not my life, was from our bedroom, it was about that corner, to our daughter's bedroom, which is now my study, in this corner. So it was about that long a walk.
Yeah.
And I'd have to make that walk in the morning, and I knew if I detoured at all, my writing could easily be delayed. And if I opened an email or did any of it, if I didn't just turn on my computer and go straight to writing, I was pretty well dead. And so, and my instinct was, what's the world doing? What are my friends up to? Because I'm kind of gregarious, so that was being alone by myself in that room for the next 6 hours. It was horrible. So anyway, I mean, that's the, but when I finish the writing each day at about 1:30 or whatever, I usually break for breakfast. I would feel pretty good. 2,000 words, whew, man, or whatever the number was. I'm making progress, and then by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I would say, is this any good? Is this readable at all? And actually, there are things that are really helpful that might interest you. Stephen King's book on writing is a wonderful, wonderful book, and I sort of kept it by me. And he does things as basic as get rid of all the adverbs. He hates the ly word, and so now when I read it and I see an ly word, I'm like, geez, how did that get by me? But he also, it's also it's autobiographical, and the key point that he really makes is how much he loves it. He's not whole unless he's doing it. That's not me. But it's true of almost anybody in any job. If they bring joy to it, if they love what they're doing, it is infectious.
Yep.
Now, even when it's rotten. And so that was a nice thing to hear about all of your introductions, that you are finding pleasure in what you're doing. And that obviously is going to be felt by your customers and taxpayers and others.
I do have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Unrelated to that comment.
Tell me, is this the way you want to do this? Because
Oh, yeah.
Totally.
Okay, because I don't want
And
to.
after this, I'll shut up and everybody else. So like Hoy, when I was reading it, I was thinking about, things that could apply to our work here. And in bus operations, my group, we have 3,000 bus drivers. And Seattle, as you know, is a progressive environment in general, but we still have the full spectrum of political opinions and commitments that are represented in our country right now. And some of the far right elements, like in the rest of the country right now, have taken actions that have violent underpinnings. And when I was reading your book and reading about how consistently one of the themes I pulled out, was the repeated going to people and having that relationship and knowing them and the active listening and the time spent on that. I was just wondering what your take is on our current political situation, how we can take lessons from your international experience to a national setting. And I'm hoping your answer, I'll think about our group of transit operators who represent that same divided population.
Well, a big part of doing this work well is understanding and knowing people. But I think in our political space, and in most of the conflict countries that I've worked in, the divisions have gotten so clear that there's very little communication between them. So I know in my own case, and maybe in some of your cases, that if I was asked to name 10 people, 10 friends who I politically disagree with, and that I have active conversations about my disagreements, I would come up short, 9 or 10, certainly 7. So I do know some people, and the characterization of those people, even by people who are close to me in my life, might further prevent that from happening. So that would be one quick test of just sort of how divided we are. But the second element of it is to make it a comfortable subject for conversation. So things that make it uncomfortable in Washington, and I think it's potentially worrisome in our country, because these things, divisions do lead to violence, do lead to, basically, if you read any of the literature on sort of peace building, it tends to show that most of these divisions start with two of us disagreeing, and then we climb the tree. then we get a friend to agree with us, and the other guy's a jerk. And that person then reciprocates, and then we want to build a group of people that agree with us, and then we want to, and then the people in the middle get attacked first, because they're saying, oh, no, we can actually talk to these people. That's ridiculous. So they're taken out. But conversations in Washington that are really unsettling, and they are very dominant right now, are things oftentimes start with statements such as, the fact of the matter is. It's like, okay, it's unlikely there are going to be any facts, but it's really not like the fact is decisive. It's a fact about some element that doesn't actually clinch the argument. So those are all habits that we have to work our way out of. But there is comfort in finding your tribe or whatever it happens to be. And of course, I can tell you that when I'm not an expert in the Middle East, I haven't spent a lot of time on the Arab, the Palestinian, Israeli issue. But when I did drive around there for 2 days, I found that almost nobody I talked to had a personal contact on the other side. And that was it's almost physically impossible because the geography is so tiny. But on the other hand, we live in cities, towns, neighborhoods, and we also create those divisions. But then it shows up in a damaging way that we find that I had a meeting with the leading pollster on the Palestinian side, highly respected by all people. And he said that at that point, something like 60% of both sides believe in the Camp David Accords. But comparable numbers, or higher numbers, and I'm sure they're much higher now, didn't think that the other side would accept them, or that they would trust them if they did accept them. But there was, so the substance was like, well, we could all salute the substance, but now it's all about a culture and attitude. So just to give you one other thing so I was at a conference this last week that I'm on the board of a thing called the Alliance for Peace Building. It is what it sounds like. And we had a presentation by a professor from Harvard, the Weatherhead Institute, I think it's called. And she has embraced the concept of dignity. And so dignity she's written a book about it, and so so she thinks that this is the essential element. And she's an advisor to peace processes. Many times she tried to get more women involved in the peace process and whatnot, which is woeful, and a series of other things of that sort. But she found that as she was advising these peace negotiators and looking at peace processes, that there was always an undercurrent that was not recognized in the conversation about the substance. We'll have this new political system, this election, this peacekeeping force. There was always an undercurrent that was not recognized by anybody, as if it didn't exist. And the undercurrent was something like, who are you to talk to me that way? Do you know what you have done to me? I mean, this anger, this pain. So that's how she said all of the concept of dignity. But she was talking with Desmond Tutu, and she said, and Tutu she said something like, and they suppressed they took away their dignity, or something like that. And Tutu, I don't know if you've ever seen Tutu, but he's very expressive. He wouldn't be much of a poker player. He's like, what are you saying? And she's running through her mind what she had just said. And it's like, there's nothing that wrong. And it turned out, so Tutu said, nobody could take away your dignity. You're born with your dignity. He was read Mandela. Read his autobiography. He expresses it. So sure enough, she goes to Mandela's because she's trying to understand what her own core concept really means. And it basically says, Mandela, early in the book, he's talking about the prison guards on the island, and he says he discovers that what they want to do is they want to treat him in a certain way, and that will diminish his dignity. He said, then I knew I was fine from that point on because nobody could take away my dignity. Now, her conclusion was that respect is earned. You have to go. So most of us go to respect and dignity almost. I do it almost as synonyms. But I just thought Okay, now that's a, again, if you're dealing with people with their political feelings, I mean, it starts with, it's not that hard to listen to people. I mean, I've met people who I knew had killed people, okay? I mean, in Rwanda, you're either a victim or you're a genocidist, so it's kind of, or, you know, Charles Taylor, the president of Liberia, I mean, he had, I mean, I just felt like the blood was dripping off his hands as I shook his hand, but, you know, you're there for a purpose. I mean, you're there because you really believe that you can actually help things get better. And that should be, I mean, that's at the core of public service, obviously. It's not like we're gonna make things perfect. That's because it's a human enterprise, so, and I do think public enterprises get into big time trouble on that score by suggesting that they're better than is humanly possible.
So, I mean, is it an oversimplification to say that so much of it is about relationship?
No, I mean, I think it's really important, because at the end of the day, it does get down to how you relate to other people. So you're only credible, I mean, I don't really go in as a problem solver, because although I'm from New England, so it's a little bit overdeveloped, in my family in particular. But, you know, you can't, I mean, I don't know how you are with the people in your lives, but I don't do that well with people who are close to me in my lives. They ask for advice sometimes, and then they take it sometimes, even when they've asked for it. And, you know, that's, so if it's that way with the people who I think have a lot of confidence in me, would probably call me when they're at their worst moments. Oh, why should these strangers in Serbia be that much more solicitous? So you really got to work at it all the time, and a good way to do it is to understand them. I'm a big admirer of George Mitchell and what he did in the Northern Ireland peace process, not just because he's from Maine and I like him and I know him, friends, but because he actually took a really difficult process. He was by far the most distinguished person in the room the whole time, and yet he let those oafs talk non-stop until they became embarrassed about how often they were repeating themselves. And then he had a position to actually make, you know, to advance the peace. That takes a lot of patience. I mean, one of the things he said to me that I love, and I quoted the book, you might not have seen it, was, there's the only place he's been in his life. He's now like the national hero of Northern Ireland. I mean, they've named all kinds of things after him. And but he said it's the first place I've gone in my life where people drive 100 miles to receive an insult. So, I might drive 10 to give one. Probably not. Pick them 1, 2 miles. Anyways, that starts me good.
Thank you.
But it's, you know, again, what's so much fun about a book is that you really get to sort of lay out the layers. You get to go to the layers. And I ran for office when I was 26, and I probably went to layers that people didn't want to entertain. Certainly not at that time from that guy that age.
Quick question, maybe it's not a quick question. So Hoy especially came into this organization helping us think about how we could reorganize in an effort to better deliver on our service promise to the region, to the future, et cetera. And I was struck by a number of points in your book where the State Department or the Department of Defense, or just the executive branch generally in Washington, doesn't seem well organized to deliver on much of anything. And yet some of the initiatives you led and some of the offices that you worked with did just that. They were very effective. So I wonder if you could just comment a little bit about being successful inside a bureaucracy that is not designed to be successful.
Yeah. Well, it's really a great question. And one piece of advice I'd give you, because you all work in a big organization, is that I do think to really be effective, you have to have a perverse fascination for bureaucracies. Because I mean, if it's a pure fascination, it would be perverse. So it's better that you have a perverse fascination. But so it really is important. I mean, you just have to kind of, because if not, your good ideas are gonna land flat, and you're not gonna have any allies. I mean, it's just, so the amount of bridge building that has to take place internally. So I think you probably referred to it, or saw it, but when I started with this last job, the State Department it builds itself. It has a historic marker outside the 23rd Street entrance that says it's the oldest bureaucracy in America. Okay, so that's a point of pride. So that can be problematic. And so when I went to work at the State Department, almost everybody would ask me, anybody who knew anything about it would say, "You really think you can do this? You really think it's possible?" I said, "Hey, what about those geographic bureaus, or whatever the problem happened to be?" And so I took on a line that I think somebody else had, which was 50% of my job will be doing diplomacy inside this building. And I use it for laugh lines and go, and so they thought I knew what I was talking about. But near the end of my service, I used that line at a public event, and somebody came up to me and said,
90%.
"Rick, you're so naive. It's gotta be 90%. So then I realized what my job was. It was 90% internal diplomacy and 90% the actual work of peacebuilding. And that's, a lot of public service work is more than 100%. That is both the satisfying element and the distracting, wearing element of it. And, I could say by the time I finished that job at the State Department, I was pretty worn out. I needed to drive around the US and not go to any conflict countries, stay at Holiday Inns, and just really tone down because I care an awful lot. But I think, just maybe a tighter answer for you is, I have seen big organizations at the State Department, at the UN, and elsewhere work oftentimes because they had really good leaders. Now, obviously, the first piece of really good leadership is to have a good leadership team. But I could literally see UNICEF take off if it had the right leader, or slow down. So I'm not somebody who says it's all about leadership, but leadership really does matter. And you have a bad day. A lot of people have a bad day. And so how you moderate that is really important. So, but anyway, I'm hopeful because to me, I've seen them all, almost anything take off. I can see the Middle East Bureau of the State Department take off or not. I can see an embassy in Jordan take off or be still. And oftentimes it's the openness, the inclusiveness, the trust of the sort of thing, but it's mostly culture. You cannot put enough time into culture. I'm pretty small on reorganizations because people spend so much time worrying about the structures and the changes and what's this going to mean to me. So I try to make all of that as invisible or as easy as possible, rather than. And what I've noticed, I noticed at AID, but I heard a Brazilian political scientist when I went down to there back in the 1980s. He said that in Brazilian government, what they do is they have all these monkeys in a tree, shake the tree and all the monkeys fall out, and then they go through a reorganization or whatever, and somehow the monkeys all end up back in the tree, maybe at different branches. And so I saw AID do this a bunch of times. We're gonna change our mission, we're gonna change, and then it's like, no, what you've really done is you've accommodated everything that we've ever done. It's been reaccommodated, but in a different space. So lots of insecurity. And that's going on at the UN right now because the Secretary General is going through a big reorganization. And people are just, I'm hearing, I'm not there, I don't know, but I'm hearing that everybody's holding on and worrying. They're holding on to their seat and worrying. And so I think that you'll see that I suggest a lot of things to do that don't require big redesign, but they require because I still think you gotta get at the culture, you gotta get at the culture. And it's not easy to get at the culture by just moving boxes around. Some, but you can by moving, I mean, there are people who can really affect culture big time. So anyway, that's my homegrown thing, but I'm not a management consultant, so.
Very helpful.
Yeah, I have a question, and first this has nothing to do with my question, my favorite line, and I want Rob to repeat this, is that I have always insisted that no one who ever works for me will go to jail.
Well, I'll come and visit, especially if you want a book signing or you got a book club.
Anyway, we have a ballot measure here in Washington State right now, Initiative 1631, which is sponsored by corporate America against the opposition, which leads me sort of the international sphere, is that many people overseas believe we're a colonizing power through Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Facebook, et cetera, and they are therefore hostile to the United States. And you've laid out a role for us as a leader in peacemaking, as distinct perhaps from when the UN was founded. So there's this tension between sort of people who don't like us, these international organizations which perhaps don't work that well, coalitions. So how do we navigate that? Is it on a case by case and we go into this country, or do we always have allies in the world when we're trying to do peacemaking?
So give me a little more.
And this administration is clearly, hostile to us leading any of these things. If it was up to them, I think that they'd put a wall and we would stay right here in this country and let other people deal with the world's problems. And that may be where we end up, should he get another term.
Well, again, I think it comes down to showing that we could play a distinctly constructive role in a place. I think you've got to convince the American public. This book makes a really strong argument for much greater engagement with the American public, and without it, I think we'll be naked out there. We'll look as if we're representing some interest or some ideology or some tradition, or I mean, all those things are decent, but they're not compelling enough by themselves. So I think you got to make that argument that you actually know what you're talking about first when you're talking about what's going on in the place. We almost never start there. So if you read, for example, Stan McChrystal's fairly recent interview, and I think I got it into the book, where he was a commanding officer in Afghanistan, and really a good mind, and even though he stepped across the line with a Rolling Stone and insulted the president, so the president had to get rid of him. I think the president really liked him, actually, because he is one of the most better thinking, straight shooting